Good morning. Boys and girls, I have some extra stories for you today during the sermon. That's why we cut the children's story out, because you are going to hear a series of stories. What a week. This is not a sermon that was originally intended to be preached on a week like this, but rather the sermon that I'm going to share with you today is one that has been born out of the experiences I have had in the chaplaincy training program down at Vanderbilt Hospital. I'm in my third of 4 units there, just working through that preparation, and it is an intense program because you are showing up for people in the worst moments of their life. And almost every single person is praying for a miracle. And if that is what you want, then that is what I am going to pray for, because my job is to show up for you. And yet it seems like so many miracles just don't come. So this sermon kind of bubbles out of that. How can you keep showing up to situations like that, not knowing, as I was writing and thinking about this and processing it for myself, that we would have such a horrific event happen within our community? So I just wanted to share that with you so that you know kind of the backside of this tapestry, where this has come from together. But it is truly a privilege to be here and to be together today so that we can still have the opportunity to love on Maya's family. And I won't start naming names. I don't want to miss anybody who is here today. But that is the privilege that we do have as a church family, to celebrate together and to laugh together, but most importantly, to cry together, right? And to just recognize the fact that when one of us has a broken heart, we all have a broken heart. So we just ask that you would do what you do best, Madison, and love Maya's family through this time. Let's pause for another quick word of prayer. Jesus, we just ask that you would come. We would all be okay if that day was today. We just ask that until you do come, that you would help us to be faithful. Give us what we need. And we ask that our worship today would be acceptable to you. In Jesus' name, we all said together, amen. A little boy was born in the year 1857. His parents looked at him and they said, "This looks like a Milton to us." Little Milton learned how to start making candy at a young age, and then he became very brave and very ambitious. He borrowed a large amount of money from his family, and he started his very own candy-making business, and it failed. And he went from that experience where he had learned and he gained some experience, and he opened a second candy-making business, and that one also failed. So he came back to his home state of Pennsylvania, and he opened his third candy-making company. And Mr. Milton first experienced success for creating a melt-in-your-mouth caramel. And that ended up making him $1 million, which I still think that $1 million is nothing to sneeze at, but $1 million, particularly around the late 1800s, was really quite a bit of money. It also gave me a lot of courage to know that Mr. Milton was not successful until he hit the age of 40. So maybe that is a decade to look forward to after all. Now, let me give you a little clue here. You might be able to put 2 and 2 together. If we go to the next slide, I'll give you a little clue what Mr. Milton's last name was. It was Milton Hershey. And although we know and love him today for the great chocolate that he has made, many of you may not know the story. I didn't know the story of Mr. Hershey until just this summer, when my son and I had the opportunity to go to Pennsylvania and consequently to fall in love with it there. And speaking of falling in love, I want to say that one of the greatest things that Mr. Hershey ever did had nothing to do with candy, but rather the greatest thing Mr. Hershey ever did was get married to a woman whose name was Catherine, or Kitty Hershey. They were only married for 17 years. They were only married for 17 years. But once they got married, Kitty was such a cultured woman. She had a different perspective on the world, and she had a real heart for charitable giving. And she expanded Mr. Hershey's ideas on that concept. Milton Hershey would later go on to say that every person is morally obligated to share the fruits of success with others. Let me read that again. Every person is morally obligated to share the fruits of success with others. Everybody's success looks different, doesn't it? But what would happen if we were all obligated, if we took that same sense of obligation and responsibility? There would be no hungry children. I could go on, but that concept came not from Mr. Hershey, not from Mr. Moneybags, but from Kitty Hershey. And it is said that when Milton Hershey gave his first charitable gift of $5,000, everybody knew that it was really his wife. Both Mr. and Mrs. Hershey wanted to put their growing fortune to good use. They first lived in Pennsylvania, and one of the first things that Kitty did is get involved in a group. It was called the Lancaster Charity Society, and it was a group that existed to help low-income city families. And it was that experience in his young years and her young years that impacted their later choices in life. Carmel's gave Milton Hershey his first million, but chocolate is what put him on the map. When he saw that the market was growing for chocolate, Mr. Hershey sold the Carmels, gained the million, and built his first chocolate factory in 1905. Now we know and love Hershey today. Mr. Hershey had finally experienced success. But there was one type of success he never did experience. His wife, as sweet and as tender and as beautiful as she was a very, very sickly woman. She would later go on and die at a very early age. She would experience mobility issues. She would experience balance issues. And she would also experience infertility, which was particularly hurtful. That hurts in every age, in every stage. It doesn't matter if it's Bible times or 1800s or 1900s or 2025, it just hurts. But particularly because Mr. and Mrs. Hershey loved children. And when they came to that realization that they would never have children of their own, they had a choice to make. And the choice they made was to just keep working. And we'll come back to that story in a little bit. Mark chapter 7, we encounter a man who is both deaf and also mute. We heard the story there, but one thing that I believe we could write right in is the fact that Miss Martha was most definitely running triage on that day. Miss Martha, sister of Mary, you get what I'm saying here, is always the one who's in charge, and she knows who is going to go best and when and where and why. Martha is concerned with the statistics. She wants to make sure that Jesus is seeing at least 20 patients a day so that they can have maximum efficiency. So the deaf and mute man comes up, and he definitely climbs to the top of the list there. So Martha communicates. He is number one. He has been brought by his friends. His friends beg Jesus. Have you ever begged Jesus for something? You've begged Jesus for something too? Something that seems so obvious. Something that you think most assuredly Jesus would do it because this is what we need. His friends begged Jesus to lay his hands on him because we all know that Jesus has the ability to heal. Therefore, he will. Right? But Jesus takes that man aside from the crowd privately. and he starts doing really strange things. He takes fingers and puts them into ears. Boys and girls, just take out your fingers and put them in your neighbor's ears. Let's see how they respond. Personally, no thanks. It's kind of interesting because Martha gets on the radio, "Excuse me, Jesus, Jesus! We've got 19 other patients we need to encounter today. I see that you are sequestering the patient off. I hope this is not going to take more than 13 to 16 minutes because we've got documentation to do. Jesus, this is going to take a long time. Jesus, why are you doing something so weird? Jesus, people don't like it when you put fingers in your ears, especially if it's not yours. Jesus, can you hear me?" Now, doesn't that just take the cake? The man is deaf. Now, Jesus is deaf too. Jesus takes him aside and he puts his fingers into his ears and then he spits and he touches his tongue. And those are things that have never been done for this man before. And the next part of the verse, it tells us that Jesus looks up to heaven because that is where his strength comes from, and he sighed. That seems like a really odd detail to include, but this is the book of Mark, and Mark doesn't waste our time, so he gives us these pregnant details in which he says Jesus sighs because he's got his fingers in the ears of a deaf man and he's touching his tongue, and the deaf man wants to hear but can't, and behind him is a bunch of religious people who have completely working ears that can hear, but they won't. And that's really exhausting to Jesus. And that's really hard for Jesus. And so he sighs. And then he says, "Boy, to the one who wants to hear, be opened." And just like that, his ears are opened, his tongue is released, and he spoke plainly. And the first voice that he ever heard was Jesus. And the first words that he ever said, Jesus. Kind of jealous of him, you know? And then Mark 8, Martha is again running triage, because Martha always runs triage because she does it best. Somebody else comes to Bethsaida. Some people brought to Jesus a blind man and they begged. They did what? Have you ever begged Jesus to do something that seems so obvious? They begged Jesus, "Would you just touch this guy?" And this time, he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Martha gets on the radio again. "Excuse me, Jesus! You realize you are taking a blind man on a walk? Jesus! We are not concerned about his step count. We are concerned about his sight. Would you get with the program? Jesus, you realize he could walk a lot safer. You realize he could walk a lot faster. You realize he could be a lot more efficient if you healed him first. Jesus, did you just hang up on me?" Jesus took the blind man by the hand and he led him out of the village. When he had spit on his eye, Jesus was really on a roll in Mark with the spit. He spit on his eyes and he laid his hands on him and he asked him, "Do you see anything?" That's a really important question because usually it's not a question that's asked, but the story goes on. And the Bible says, he looked up and he said, well, I see people, but they look like trees, walking. Are you telling me that Jesus didn't heal him right the first time? It's interesting, and it's really hard for me to stay true to the message for today because a whole nother sermon could be written about the fact that sometimes partial healing heals us better than full healing. And maybe Jesus did it like this. In fact, this is the only miracle that Jesus did part way, if you will. I feel uncomfortable using that word because we know the end of the story, but Jesus does the miracle halfway, and maybe it's because he's trying to teach his disciples, you will come to be able to see things clearly, but now you see them through a glass dimly. Are you following me here? Like there will come a time when you will see a little bit better, but then you're going to be able to see face to. So just because you can't see face to face now doesn't mean that my face isn't here. Jesus lays his hands on him again, because does Jesus do anything halfway? He opened his eyes. His sight was restored. He saw everything clearly. Wow. We jump back now to a story that we can find in Mark chapter 6. And we've got to kind of zoom out and do a little bit of historical stuff here to understand this story. While Jesus was alive, he allowed John the Baptist to die a violent death. What? You realize that uncomfortable feeling you have in the pit of your stomach right now just hearing that one of our teenagers, one of our Madison campus teenagers has experienced a violent death? That uncomfortable feeling, that is the exact same feeling that the disciples had at the time of this story. They were shook. Just like you are today. Because they knew, like you know, that Jesus could have stopped it. And for the life of them, they could not figure out why he didn't. There is something about unjust, untimely deaths that shake us as a community and leave us as different people. It makes us uncomfortable. And the disciples saw that Jesus let John the Baptist die this violent death, and they didn't know why, and they didn't understand, and they were confused, but they kept on with Jesus. And then the next thing that happens is Jesus feeds 5,000 men plus women and children. And the disciples are like, we didn't understand that, but we understand this. And this Jesus is going to be perfect for us because he's going to break not just the power of the Romans, he's going to break the Romans. And Jesus is going to be able to heal all of our wounded soldiers. And Jesus is going to be able to take 5 loaves and 2 fish and heal and feed all of our armies. Jesus is here. We must crown him king. I, as the disciple, understand better than God. I, as the disciple, understand better than God what should happen next. Ugh. So the disciples and that crowd of 5,000 plus people say, we don't get that, but we get this, and we know what should happen next. Let's crown Jesus king. So they fire up the band, and they're all ready. Crown him with many. That was really pathetic. Crown him with many. And Jesus sees the same thing that they see, but he understands what they cannot. And he realizes that his throne is going to be a cross. He knows that they are already, the religious leader, hunting for his life. They are going to take and murder him, and we cannot waste a single second. So Jesus whips out an authority that we have not seen on the regular. And verse 45 of Mark chapter 6 says, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowds. And the disciples were confused because they knew exactly what should happen. They knew exactly that Jesus should be crowned king. They knew exactly why he was refusing, because Jesus is just too meek. Jesus is just too mild. I, as the disciple, understand better than God what should happen here. And Jesus puts his big righteous foot down and says, get in the boat and go to the other side. And the disciples kind of peed their pants a little. They weren't accustomed to seeing Jesus like this, but they didn't dare question the authority that he had. So they stomped down the mountain. Judas is ticked. He's already got Amazon deliveries on the way. The party favors the blowers. The crown is being shipped from China. Hello. They get down to the beach, and Peter's all kicking rocks, probably not saying very nice things either. And they're just waiting. Now, Jesus is dismissing a crowd of 5,000 plus people. That could have gone a lot faster and a lot more efficiently if he had had a larger team of people doing that. But Jesus couldn't trust anybody else to help him with that. You see, it's interesting to me that the thing that I see as efficient, Jesus doesn't. So he dismisses that crowd all by himself, single-handedly, after a long day of teaching and preaching and healing and dealing with his little disciples. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. Check this out. Can you take us to the next slide, please? When evening came, the boat was out on the sea, because finally the disciples realized, he not coming. He not coming with us. We got to go. We should obey. I don't want to obey. I don't understand why I have to obey, but I'm just going to do what Jesus said. And for all the fun that we're going to make of the disciples in this particular story, this is one thing they finally did right. It was delayed obedience. Which is that obedience? I don't know. It's another sermon for another day. The boat is out on the sea. He's alone on the land. I need you to tuck this detail away. Who was the only one that was alone in this story? Well, let me hear it. Jesus. Do you ever feel like you're alone? But Jesus saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And they had been fussing, and they had been fighting and kicking rocks and disappointed and canceling Amazon orders. And they didn't even realize that a huge storm was building until it was right upon them, and they were in the middle of it. The story goes on about the fourth watch of the night. He came to them walking on the sea. That's about 3 to 6 a.m. You've heard your mother say that nothing good happens after midnight, or maybe she said 11 or 9, or I don't know what time she said. Nothing good happens after the hours of 3 to 6 a.m. I can tell you right now, Pastor Jeremy cannot be awoken during those hours. He would have missed the show if he had been there. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they were so tired. It was so dark. They were so discouraged. They were so confused. They thought it was a ghost because they had bought into those popular theories that this was like an omen of destruction. And they cried out because they all saw him. But rather than Jesus bringing comfort, they were actually terrified. Immediately, Jesus speaks to them and he says, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And it's interesting because we get this story from other gospels and they give us this phrase that's really kind of hard to understand because they say that Jesus was about to pass them by. And honestly, my American ears think, well, how rude. You see me struggling and you're about to pass me by? Does that seem like the Jesus thing to do? But here's the thing. The God who passes by. He did that to Moses. And he didn't do that to Moses to ignore him or to scare him, but rather he takes Moses, he puts him up on a mountain. He's like, "Get ready, boy. I am about to pass by." And he says, "I will make all my goodness." Oh, that's right. You have goodness. "I will make all my goodness," and that's a lot of goodness, "pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord." And breaking news, it's going to scare you to death. I'm going to pass by and that's all you can take, you little sinful human being. Come on, this is going to be cool. And he says that same thing. It's the God who passes by to Elijah too. You might remember that one time when God was like, "Hey, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." A lot of similarities. God is preparing these people for his presence. There's also a mountain involved and fair warning that he is about to come because it's kind of a big deal when God is about to come. "Behold, the Lord passed by, a great strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. He wasn't in the earthquake. He wasn't in the fire. He was in that still small voice." But he wanted to prepare Elijah. He was passing by, not to pass by, not to ignore, but rather to prepare for the greatness that was about to come. Jesus, flipping back to our last passage here, is about to pass by the disciples, and suddenly they see him and they recognize him, and rather than being afraid, they want him with them. And anytime that we ask Jesus to be with us, he will answer that request. So after he calms them down, he gets into the boat with them, and the winds cease. And they are utterly astounded. We'll put a pin in that and go back to the Hershey's now, kids. The Hershey's had a choice to make. They loved children. They couldn't have any of their own. And so in 1909, they decided to start a school for low-income children, particularly boys. It has since then expanded. And to build an entire town where there was transportation and factories and jobs. And Mr. Hershey would later boast that not a single person was laid off during the Depression. He kept all of his workers going. But the passion that they had for creating their own family, they took and they turned it into loving on other kids who had less privilege, because the purpose of privilege is to turn around and help those who don't have it, like you. I got so excited about this summer. Sammy and I went on this tour. Jeremy was actually working out in California. Meanwhile, I went to Pennsylvania. I learned that today, this school has become an entire campus that you can see spread out there. They've got stadiums and barns and pools. They provide free clothing and free food and free education and free health care for every single child. How many children do they have? They are servicing about 2,000 children each year. And they just started a new school for children who are 0 to 5-year-olds, also coming just to the day school, not to the boarding, to provide programs for low-income infants as well. I heard this story. I saw the dorms. They put these children up in the most magnificent buildings. It just looks so awesome. I found out that they need house parents. They need people who love children to come and love on these children. And I came home and I was so excited, and I told Pastor Jeremy, I love Nashville, but I've got to tell you about something in Pennsylvania. They are looking for house parents. And rather than living with one 6-year-old, we could have 12. What could be better? And Pastor Jeremy and I are very supportive of each other's dreams. But after that conversation, I discovered that if I was going to go and do this in Pennsylvania, that I was going to need to get a new husband. And I kind of like the one that I have. And it would be a lot of work because I've trained him really well after all these years. And so, fear not, we'll be right here in Nashville. Oh, thank you. But what a beautiful ministry. I mean, I'm just sitting there looking at the chocolate factory in Pennsylvania, and I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. Children's lives are being saved. Low-income families are provided the opportunity to get education and all of their needs met so that these children can have privilege, because the Hershey's had privilege and they had power, and they turned around and offered it to those who didn't. And it is so beautiful that it lives to today, 2025. And 3 years after his wife's untimely death, Mr. Hershey gave a large amount of his fortune to continue cranking out students and continue bettering the program. And then when he died, he left another huge chunk, which tells me that the profits that you provide every time you build every time you buy Hershey chocolates goes straight to supporting this campus. And Pastor Jeremy will not let me move, but I can eat chocolate. So I bought some, and I brought some for you today too, because I support children, and that's why. And if Mrs. Hershey was here today, I would never say to her, love your infertility, girl. So glad you were barren. Because that's between her and God. But I do stand here today, and I just want to say, Mrs. Hershey, and I believe that I will, because no one can do this great of a ministry without having Jesus live in their hearts. It's just not possible. There's a lot of things I don't know, but the Hersheys will be in heaven. Mrs. Hershey, this was the most painful thing, and you did not understand why this was happening, but you chose to keep on working. Can you take us to one of our closing slides here where we've got all 4 of those stories? You chose to keep on working. And one day, I want to look forward to meeting that deaf and mute guy, because what we often do, and I did this on purpose, is I skipped straight to the miracle, because that's what we want. We want easy resolution. I don't want to dwell on that part in the middle where it was painful and uncomfortable and I didn't understand. I don't want to dwell on that part where he was still deaf and he was still mute. I did that on purpose. And so I want to highlight that part for you, that before the miracle, there was a time in this guy's life where Jesus said, come here. I want to spend some time with you. There was a time in his life where Jesus didn't take away the pain. Let's sit in that for a moment. There was a time in his life where Jesus did not take away the pain. And I wonder if it's that time that allowed the man to grow his faith until he came to the point where the miracle happened. And I don't know, but I wonder if the miracle would have happened without that time. And I don't think it's an accident that Mark tells us a similar story in a similar vein in the very next chapter, where he says, this blind guy is coming. He's still facing dangers, unaware, but Jesus says, bro, before I fix the blindness, because that's not an issue. That's no thing for me. Before I fix the blindness, I wondered, would you take my hand? Would you let me lead you through this life? Do you have the faith it takes to walk with me, even when I don't give you what you want? And I'm asking that question to you because I'm asking that question to me. What would have happened if the blind guy said no? I just came from out there. I am hurting. Don't you see? You can fix it. But again, I wonder if it was that discomfort and that inconvenience and that disability that gave him the ability to grow his faith to a place where the miracle happens and Jesus heals him. And last but certainly not least, Jesus, even when his little disciples are out in the middle of the ocean, it's dark, it's foggy, it's foamy, they can't see him, but the Bible tells us he saw them. If you cannot see his face, rest assured that he can still see you. And at the proper time, Jesus went to his disciples and he got in the boat with them. He acted like he was going to pass by, but really it gave them the opportunity to prepare to see his glory. And Jesus Christ is waiting now for the appropriate time to come. And he's going to pass by us and show us his glory. Come, Jesus, come. I hope today is that day. But the question is, will you take the opportunity to build your faith in the discomfort and in the uncomfortable? Do you have the faith to take his hand even when you don't get what you want? Even when you don't understand? Do you have the faith to walk with Jesus before the miracle happens? I leave you with that question today, and it's a question for myself as well. Come, Jesus, come.